Hello and welcome to Healing Trauma Mamas. I'm your host, Madon Wingo. Thank you for joining us as we share in our stories and experiences of healing from childhood traumas and birth traumas. Listen as we discuss our struggles, our failures, our strengths, and our victories, and all those lessons we've learned along the way. Today, I get to have a special guest. Sarah is joining us from South Carolina. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me this evening. I know it's a little late.
Just a little, but not anything out of the ordinary nowadays.
Yeah, especially with mamas, right? You never know how late we're going to have to be up or in the middle of the night.
Yep.
So, Sarah, if you don't mind, just kind of giving us the listeners a little bit of an intro. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. So my name is Sarah Bilger, and I am a wife and a mama of two. I have a 2.5-year-old, and I also have a 3.5-month-old.
Aww.
So he is brand new. And I work full time as a mechanical engineer. And I also am newly certified in postpartum nutritional coaching and certified as a VBAC doula. And I also host my own podcast called Entering Motherhood.
My word, you've got it all going on.
Busy mama.
Absolutely. Mechanical engineer, do you do that from home?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I went
Wow.
after COVID hit and everything started to go remote. I had switched over to a company that I previously worked for who was allowing all their employees to work remotely. So they are based in Pennsylvania, but I am in South Carolina working remotely for them.
Isn't our world crazy these days? How we can do stuff
Yeah.
like that? Wow.
Yeah. It
That's
worked out really
wonderful.
nice.
So great. So do you have a boy and a girl?
Yes, I do. Yeah. My oldest is
Oh,
a little girl, and then our youngest is a boy.
how sweet. So he's pretty new, 3 months old, you said?
Yep.
Oh, that's a ball of joy time, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Love all
It's
those giggles.
it's been interesting going back to work right at 12 weeks.
Wow.
And then now he is still staying at home with me as I work, and that's been an adjustment.
Has it been a challenge or has it just been just new?
Just new. I mean, for the most part, he's a very good baby, and I'm very fortunate that, he just likes to cuddle like all little babies, I guess, but he's very content as long as, the diapers changed, he's fed, and he's somewhere comfy.
Uh-huh. And
So,
probably close to mommy.
yep.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. How great that you get to do that.
Yeah, it's nice.
So VBAC doula?
Yep.
Do,
Yeah.
do you only doula for VBACs?
So that is just currently something that I had gotten certified in because I was preparing for my own VBAC.
Nice.
So when I was looking for resources and such, I had found, a course, and then it also allowed you to get certified as a VBAC doula. So I said, you know what, why not just go all in and get
Absolutely.
certified? So then, when the time comes, I can help other moms.
What a great way to educate yourself too.
Yeah, so I guess I was kind of my first client.
Wow. Hey, that works. That's wonderful. I bet that felt pretty empowering to be able to just educate yourself and be fully trained like that so that you could kind of be prepared for whatever labor threw at you.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was definitely something that, I wanted for myself, and I wanted to gain that knowledge so that I can be as best prepared as I could.
I love that. Well, I'd love to hear kind of how, why you came to Healing Trauma Mamas, how you joined our Facebook group and ended up hearing about us and kind of your journey. I'm sure it starts with at least motherhood in the beginning, which I don't know your full story. So I'd love to hear if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it was, in preparing for my first birth and, going into my daughter's birth, I planned to have a completely unmedicated, no interventions kind of birth. And I prepared in all the ways I thought I was supposed to, and I took the classes and I read all the books and I even did a prenatal yoga
Oh,
class.
wow. Yeah. Was
I
this
thought I was
within OBGYN or
the yoga class.
no, your who was taking care of you? Your
Oh,
provider.
yes. Yeah. Yep.
Sorry.
Yep. I had a, yep. Yeah. A traditional like OB
Yeah, just
office.
the
And
standard what you
yeah,
usually expect to go
that's
do,
just
right?
what I thought the route was and
Hmm.
what I needed to do and how things would go. And I was taking all the steps that seemed logical and doing all the things that pregnant moms were quote unquote supposed to be doing and
Hmm.
prepping the nursery and having a baby shower and taking the photos of your bump like every
Of
week.
course.
Like that was just the progression of what I felt, was how you prepare for a baby to come into your life. And, then it came time for my daughter to be born and things just didn't go to plan, I guess. Like they didn't work out how I had envisioned.
Hmm.
And the first sign of any sort of labor with her birth was my water breaking.
Oh, wow, that's
And
unusual.
exactly. Like that was
Yeah.
one of the top things that I was hearing like, oh, your water won't break. Like that's
Hmm.
something of the movies and like don't worry, blah 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 blah, like all these things. So when it happened,
You
I
were
was
caught
kind
off
of in
guard.
completely off
It's like
guard.
this
I
is
was in
not what we planned.
disbelief. Right. I just immediately I was like, well, this can't be it because they said this wouldn't happen.
Hmm.
And that really just, you know, sparked me to be in a mindset of panic and fear,
Oh, darn it.
like
I
right
hate when you
off the
get thrown for a
bat.
loop like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that was like, I did not prepare myself for, what to do if my plan didn't go according to plan.
Hmm.
I didn't make a backup plan.
Yeah.
It was just kind of, like the course that I took and the books and stuff I said I was
They
reading
didn't
and
talk
everything.
about that.
Right. They just said, like, come up with your birth plan. Here's a spreadsheet that you can fill out with your, hopes and wishes and just hand this to your doctor and everything will, turn out the way it's supposed to.
Not quite. So did
Exactly.
you call a labor and delivery or did you head in or what did you do?
So I was just basically stuck in the bathroom for a while, like kind
In
of just
shock?
sitting there, yeah, in disbelief. Like I tried to keep like standing up off the toilet because I thought essentially I just peed myself.
Hmm. Most
I
women do.
was I just, I kept on trying to stand up and fluid just kept on leaking out. So I called to my husband and I'm not sure who he called first or what had happened, but he finally like, heard from someone and they said, come to the hospital. Like your water broke. You need to be here.
Were you having any contractions?
Not that I knew of.
Okay.
So once we did get to the hospital and, we explained what had happened, they were like, well, if your water broke, you need to be here. And not knowing anything,
Mm-hmm.
I just consented and agreed and said, okay, like, I guess I need to be here.
Well, of course.
And
It's your first time doing this.
right. Yeah. I didn't know anything otherwise. And I just, okay, yes. Okay. I'm here.
Hmm.
So they hooked me up and they said I was having some contractions, but I really wasn't feeling much of anything. And then once I started to feel something, I got a little hopeful. I was like, okay, like here it comes. Like baby's gonna be here soon. Who
Oh,
knows, Like
that
I
was
just
wishful
wasn't
thinking.
right. And
Darn
they
it.
checked me and I wasn't even a centimeter dilated.
Oh
So
no.
I was like, okay, well, like maybe I could, because like from what I had known or thought, like I was like, well, dilation doesn't mean anything. And
Hmm.
but like hearing that and just like knowing that like I wasn't even remotely started, I guess, really just kind of caused me again to like have that panic and fear
Hmm.
and become really stressed. And I don't think that my body knew how to relax or that I needed to relax.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure that was very difficult for your body and your brain at the same time, because people don't
yeah,
realize how much your brain and your mental status plays into labor.
so much.
Yes, and I know you know now because you've done so much education, and reading and all the stuff that you've done. But when you're the first time in that, you have no clue, and everything is so exciting at first, and then
Mm-hmm.
it can be terrifying because you don't know exactly what's happening, and you're expecting these people that you've gone to help you because
Right.
they're the experts. They know what's going on, and they don't usually give you a lot of information.
Yeah, yeah. I just, I was just listening to them and hearing what they had to say and they know better than I do. Like that was the mindset that I was in.
So did that start as we call the cascade of interventions?
Pretty much,
Mhm.
like it was a couple hours of labor. Like I was still like holding on to my, I want to go unmedicated and like I'm going to do
Mhm.
this and it's okay. And then I started shaking and throwing up and again, like
Oh yeah.
naive me is like, oh, this is transition.
Mhm. That would be
and
nice.
and here it was just me being in like complete shock and
Mhm.
panic and fear ultimately. And so like they were checking me constantly, like trying to see like where I was at. And I had only gotten to 2 centimeters. And
Oh, you
it
poor
was
thing.
it was rough. It was really, really rough. And so, I remember just crying to my husband and like I did have a doula.
Oh,
But
good.
I think she might have been a little
Oh
panicked just as
no.
much as I was, kind of like I didn't know like that this would, I don't know. I don't know like what had like happened, but like I was like crying to both of them, just saying like I can't do this. Like, like I need to make it stop. Like
Right.
I couldn't control what was happening to me, and that was causing me to spiral. Like it was coming, like contractions were going and I wanted it to just stop,
Mhm.
which is not like a good state to be in when you're, like giving birth.
It
It's
sounds like your body was
happening.
just terrified.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was nothing that I could do to stop it from happening.
How did your husband deal with that?
Um, I think he just wanted me to feel, safe and heard, and he wanted to help me. He
Not
never,
in pain, right?
yeah, yeah, he never saw me like that.
Yeah, that's hard
He
for him.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was really hard on him too to see me crying, begging him to just make it stop.
Oh, yeah. Because he's never done that before either.
Right. No, I mean, like we were both convinced that we were just going to go in the hospital, like rocket, baby was going to come out and like
Man.
everything would be okay. And so I did, end up getting the epidural and,
Mhm.
it helped me relax a little bit for the most part, but I still feel like my body just wasn't ready, prepared. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not sure. I can't go back. I can't, you know, judge what had happened in those
We
moments.
kind of get frozen
But
a lot of
yeah,
times. And that's like
yeah,
when there's so much being thrown at us, that is, then we feel out of control.
yeah,
We freeze. I mean,
yeah.
that's what my husband's a police officer, and he talks about this often because people talk about the fight or flight
Mm-hmm.
response. He said, but they often forget the freeze,
Yeah.
because that one honestly happens more often for people, is that they get things just get thrown at them and they don't really know how to respond. And in labor, your body doesn't even sometimes know what in the world to do because this isn't what we were expecting. And you just
Yeah.
freeze up. So it can't relax.
Right.
It can't function the way it needs to. And you mentally can't cope with it.
Yeah.
So that's a hard spot to be in. I'm sorry that you had to experience that. How
Yeah.
did that I know we already mentioned the cascade because that gets talked about often because that's what happens. And when you look back, you can see all the different
Right.
little steps, right? So you got
Yeah.
your epidural and it calmed down for a little bit, or at least you could cope a little bit better. Did they let you stay that way for a while, or how did things go?
Yeah, so it came to a point of being after 24 hours of my water breaking that, I still was not progressing far enough. And I started to spike a fever.
Oh no.
And at that point, it was just kind of, cesarean was being thrown into the conversation now. So it was just, hey, like we've seen this. We see how, this could turn bad. And, we just want you all to be safe. And, I think it's like that perfect example of, like you were saying, like cascading
Mm-hmm.
interventions and everything just all coming together. And I mean, after 24 hours, like I was exhausted
Yep.
and, drained physically, mentally, in all sorts of ways. And I just, I can't explain exactly like what was going on in my mind at that point because I feel like it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I was just completely
Shut
like,
down.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So I had asked like, can we wait a little longer? Like what does that look like? Like I knew I still had a choice in the matter. It wasn't, emergency situation at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, very kind and said, yeah, like, like we can wait another hour or so and really just see how things progress. And I think from the moment that they had walked out the door until they came back, I was literally just laying there praying, like,
Oh.
what can I do to have this somehow end in a way that I want it to,
Mm-hmm.
I guess? And I was just saying, like, whether that be I fully progress to a point that I can push, or the doctors come back in and say, okay, like we need to prep for the OR. I just had sat there and kind of like, I don't know, stayed with myself and
Mm-hmm.
said, like, whatever is about to happen is what is supposed to happen, I guess.
That way you could be okay with it. Probably
Yeah,
just
I
getting
was
your
just
mindset
trying
ready.
to, yeah, I was just trying to, figure out like what is happening and like why is this happening. And when they returned to check me again, I still had not progressed far enough along. And so
Oh.
I went into the OR and I had a cesarean for my first birth.
How did she do? Was your daughter right?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I mean, she was pretty far down.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a little bit of a struggle getting her out. And she was also, I guess, like sunny side up.
Oh,
So
nice.
when they first cut me, her face was right there.
Oh my.
And she was screaming before she was out,
Oh wow.
which was something I guess was unique and they thought was interesting. But you know, being on that table laid out, having them like knowing that they are cutting you open
Mm.
and having your baby out and you hear your baby cry for the first time and they say, oh, like that's interesting. Like what's interesting?
Were
Tell
you panicking?
yeah, I was like, well,
Yeah.
what happened? Like, why is she crying? Like, what's interesting? What's going on? Like, is she okay? And um, they were just saying like, like, oh, she's not out yet, but she's already crying. And
Oh,
so like
goodness.
I didn't
Yeah.
know if that was okay or normal or what. And, I had decided not to get there was I guess when they were prepping me for the OR, they had given me the choice of, do you want more or less medication? Do you want to, I forget how they kind of like phrased it, but it was
Hmm.
like, do you want to be able to remember this or not? And I was like, yes, I want to, remember the
Of
birth.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I already, couldn't get the vaginal birth that I wanted. And now this was going to be it. And, I had said to them too, like, hey, like, if we're going to do this, like, can we at least like, can she be on my chest? And like, can this happen? And that, like, I was trying to like lay down some sort of framework of a plan that I did not even plan for. And, after she was taken out, my husband tried to like bring her over and show her to me, but there wasn't enough room, I guess, like available to put her on my chest without like interfering with them like restitching me and
Oh
everything.
my.
So they kind of, I guess, I don't want to say like rejected that choice, but like they were like, oh no, like not
Not an option
now.
anymore.
Yeah. And then my husband had to leave. So I was
Oh
just there
goodness.
all by myself. Like he was able to do skin to skin with her and like be there with her, but I was stuck in this state, like
Were you
all
terrified?
alone. Yeah. Like, I mean, it was really kind of just like shocking because I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I knew what a cesarean was, but I had never known what all went into it.
Hmm.
And, I see pictures occasionally, like, of the drape or the mom with the hairnet on and things like that. But I had never even dug into it, to the extent that I know now,
I would say most
because
people don't.
right. Like that wasn't on my radar. That wasn't a path I was going to go down. That
Hmm.
wasn't, you know, what I thought was going to happen. So why would I have ever, you know, looked into it?
Right.
So, um,
So they,
it was shocking.
I'm sure it was. When did you finally get, do you know how long it was before you were finally able to be with her?
It was probably about a half an hour. I would say it
Okay.
probably took them like 10-15 minutes to maybe stitch me up and like get me right. And then I had to get wheeled into another room. And then I was able to, get to where my husband and her were.
It was
So
probably even longer than that, honestly.
it might have been. I
Yeah, now
think
that you
I
list
was
that stuff
just,
out, I'm thinking
yeah,
about it and I'm like, I bet it was longer than that actually. But
it
it's
could
hard
have
for you in
been.
that time frame
Yeah.
to know what's happening. How was that recovery?
From the cesarean or
Uh-huh.
just, I mean, I didn't know anything otherwise.
Okay.
That was my first birth. That was, again, just how I thought things were supposed to happen, be. And I guess for the most part, it was a smooth recovery from a cesarean. Like my scar wasn't very large. It was placed well. Um, but it was still, major
It's still
abdominal
surgery.
surgery.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're still going through, a huge physical change, and your body is still, you know, getting cut
Hmm. And then
and
having to recover from that and the stitches
mhm.
and then while you're caring for a newborn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to sit propped up in my bed for probably at least a week
Hmm.
because it hurt so much just to lay down and sit up to get her out of the bassinet every time she
Oh yeah.
needed me. So I just remained seated and
Oh.
slept propped up like on a pillow. for a while. And I also had, our bed is fairly, well, we have a different bed now than we did then, but our bed was fairly high.
Mhm.
And so I got a step stool
To climb up
to
and
get
down.
in and out of bed because
Oh,
it hurt so much to move my whole midsection.
oh yeah. Abdominal surgery. It
Yeah.
hurts.
Even laughing
Yeah. Oh
hurt, you
yeah.
know?
I haven't had a C-section, but I have had abdominal surgery a couple of times, and it is
Yeah,
rough. That
it
recovery
is.
is rough, and I can't imagine doing it with caring for a newborn at the same time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really don't know how you mamas do it.
Just even, like nursing her and
Oh
holding her
yeah.
and having to avoid that area. It was tough.
Mm, man. Well, so then how long was it before you got pregnant again?
So they're about 2.5 years different.
Okay. Is there anything you did in the
Um,
meantime, trying to kind of like come to grips with what happened the first time and trying to like basically process
yeah.
everything?
Yeah. I mean, like so much. And, like I think after the cesarean and everything, I really felt like the choice that I made in the end was, you know, what I had to do
Yeah.
and everything. But the whole experience was something that, like you said, I needed to process it first. I
Mhm.
needed to really go through and ask myself hard questions and relive the birth and talk through it. And at first, I passed it off like it was nothing. And I just, moved on to the next phase, like just, okay, now we're in the postpartum period. Like
Mm.
this is how it is. And I think I struggled so much postpartum because I never processed the birth and
Mhm.
I never processed like what I had experienced to the extent that I needed to. And also it was just hard adjusting to the new role as a mom and like moving on from my old life and
Yeah.
having to figure out who I was and what they I guess kind of explain as like your identity crisis, like moving
Absolutely.
into motherhood. And that was something too that I was totally unaware of before becoming a mom. It's the stuff that for whatever reason most of us don't talk about and most of us don't you know
It's a big change.
want to pregnant women or yeah, it's a huge change.
Yeah.
And
What did you find? What was some of the big challenges and hurdles for you?
so I think just understanding that I was different now and that was okay
Mm-hmm.
was probably one of the biggest things that I had to accept. And I couldn't do, I guess, all the things that I used to be able to
Mm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I I needed to split myself in ways that I wasn't used to. And I had somebody that was my responsibility and dependent on me. And I was such a, I guess, independent person that was a hard
I'm
thing
sure that was
to.
a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I loved her. I love
Of
her. Like I
course.
wanted to do everything for her, but I also had to understand that I still needed to be there for myself too.
Mhm. I have found, and I can just share for personal experience too, like it's when your role changes like that, and there's this person completely dependent upon you, and then your relationship with your husband is different. I mean, you
Mhm.
see them in a different light. They're a father now, and that's amazing. And you see all these wonderful things, but then it's not you and him anymore. And
Yeah.
there's so many challenges with that and wonderful things with that. It can be I remember a few times thinking, not quite, I wouldn't say resentful of the baby, but just thinking of like, well, if we didn't have the baby yet, then we could go ahead and go do this. Or this particular event or thing that we were trying to go do wouldn't be so challenging
Mhm.
at this moment, because babies are challenging sometimes. Trying to go like where you might usually, like say we might have usually went to the river for the weekend or something like that. It was an overhaul just to try to go do that. We could have just jumped in the car and ran and just enjoyed ourselves for the weekend. And while we loved our daughter and taking her with us and stuff, it was like we were packing the whole house to go with us just to go to the river for the weekend.
Yeah.
And I remember being overwhelmed by that a few times. I'm not sure if that's kind of, how you were, but I remember as a new mom just feeling a lot of different times overwhelmed by the not just the responsibility, but all that came with it, and how heavy it felt at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was too, you know, overwhelmed, obviously, but like overwhelmed with, am I doing it right?
Yes.
And am I doing all the things that I should for her? And, I was second guessing my decision with the cesarean, and having so many conflicting
Mm.
stories, coming at me. The more I dug into research and the more I was like looking up things, I had convinced myself that I permanently, damaged my daughter from day
Oh,
one. And that's a
that's
scary thought.
terrible.
It is. I think it was either a book I was reading or something, but they were saying that, babies born by cesarean are more likely to develop all this. And like, so I had convinced myself, like, if my daughter has health, issues, it's my
Mhm.
fault.
Oh,
And once I started, really digging into that, I also started saying, like, these aren't normal thoughts, and like, you can't be beating yourself up for this. And, I needed to get help because I was so fixated on, I had done something wrong,
mhm.
and it was all my fault.
So who did you reach out to?
I basically started, just talk therapy to begin
Good.
with, because I was, probably about like 6 months postpartum ish, and like crying
Oh,
on the floor, like crying to my husband, like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so bad at this. Like, I'm a terrible person. Like, I'm a bad mom. Like, all of these, like, really dark, terrible thoughts were just like coming to me. And I was not in I would say, like, a healthy state of mind. Like, my mental health, I just felt needed help, and I
yeah.
wanted to heal. I wanted to, get to the root of why I was feeling this way. and
Mhm.
and it wasn't normal to be beating myself up to the extent that I was.
Did you ever share that? Which I know most OBGYNs only see you to 6 months or 6 weeks postpartum, and then they don't even see
Mhm.
you again. And so you never even talk to them much. Did they ever do any type of like postpartum depression screening with you or talk with you about it? Or did they just like, well, you had a C-section and this is,
Right.
the recovery. So you're better
Yeah,
now.
I mean, at 6 weeks, I don't even think that was in my mind. I think I
Yeah.
was just trying to figure out.
You're probably just trying to keep your head over water or
Yeah,
above
yeah.
water at that point.
I was more concerned, like, am I healing okay? Like, is
Mhm.
my incision okay? Like, is everything physically okay? That I don't even think I gave my mental state a second to
Mhm.
register.
Hello, Healing Trauma Mamas listeners. I wanted to pause the podcast just for a moment to let you know about the platform that I've been using to create this podcast, Anchor by Spotify. Anchor has been so easy for me to use. As you all know, I've said many times that I'm a very unlikely podcast host. In fact, I never thought I'd be on a podcast, let alone hosting one myself. But when my daughter showed me Anchor last spring, I realized how easy it was for me to be able to create content and upload it to many different platforms using Anchor. I'm so thankful I got started, and I'm extremely thankful it's completely free. So I think that every single person has something valuable to share with the world. You listening right now have something valuable to share. And all you have to do is download the Anchor app and start your own podcast today. Let me know when you do, and I look forward to listening to it. Okay, back to the podcast. That's rough.
And I think the only time that I was ever kind of, you know, asked or it kind of like clicked in some way was with my daughter's pediatrician. And
Okay.
he had said, you know, how was the birth? And, you know,
Did you
obviously
break
like my
down?
OB, yeah, I did. I
Yeah,
cried
I
at
could
the
definitely see that.
pediatrician.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I just kind of said like it wasn't how I wanted it to be.
Mhm.
Um, and I felt almost like embarrassed that I had a cesarean.
Hmm.
And so like I told him like, oh yeah, like it wasn't, you know, what we had planned, and she was born by cesarean. And I'm assuming he had known that, but because he took the time to ask me,
Yeah.
you know, I think I was really appreciative of that, to allow that space to, you know, here we are. It was the appointment for my daughter, but he took the time to see how I was. And that was
Mhm.
more than my OB had done. You know,
Yeah.
they knew that I had had a cesarean, and it wasn't something they were just like, oh yeah, like, you know, it went well. It, it was
Mhm.
a good cesarean, and, you know, that's just how they explained it. And I think I had asked at that point, like, well, what does it mean, you know, if I have more babies?
Children.
Like, yeah, like can I have more kids? And a VBAC wasn't even, I think, something that was mentioned. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, you can have as many cesareans as you want. And
Okay.
I think I was just in like such a state of shock and like overwhelmed that I was just okay, and left that appointment.
I'm sure
But
to also be feeling like that you had already like your path was already set for you for in the future.
right.
Since you ended up having a cesarean with her, that just meant okay, that's what you're doing from here on out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. So, you know, like after I started therapy and I really, you know, started
Good.
working on myself, um it was, you know, I had anxiety on top of everything, and then it was kind of deemed, I guess, essentially like PTSD of reliving the birth and going through it and needing to process it. And
What type of therapy did they do, like EMDR or anything like that with you?
no,
Just
no,
a lot of
just
talk
basic
therapy.
talk. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I never dove into anything deeper um in regards to that,
Hmm.
but you know, I think once I had really accepted that what I had been through was, you know, difficult and
Yeah.
hard to go through, and once I had, you know, I guess accepted it was trauma that, you know, I had been through, and you know, from mental and emotional stress and just the physical injury of it all. And within a 24-hour time span, I had gone
Oh, it's
a
wild.
complete, you know, like
Yeah.
180 on my thoughts and vision and expectations, and just, I guess, thrown into this new.
Any other time, if we were like having a normal day that we expected to go just like a normal day and we ended up with major surgery by the end of the day, that's
Mhm.
traumatic. But when
Yeah.
it comes to birth, people are like, oh, well, that's an expected outcome from birth. And it's not. It shouldn't be an
Mm-mm.
expected outcome. It should be the unexpected, the one that we were hoping to completely avoid. And it just, the fact that it's so commonplace now and people really don't view it as a major event.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. And I'm sure that played into how you felt about it, that like, well, everybody else, this person, I remember thinking, well, this person had, trouble, or this person, for me, I didn't have a cesarean, but it had forceps.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very traumatic. And I remember thinking, well, this person said they did, and and I remember thinking, well, that person has C-section. I didn't have a C-section, so mine wasn't
Right.
nearly as traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only
Yeah.
imagine, how you felt. I'm so glad that you sought help. Good
Yeah.
job.
Thank you.
Yeah, for real. I mean, because
But
that takes a lot.
yeah, and I think like exactly like you said too, I think that comparison with, well, mine wasn't as bad as this person, like because
Hmm.
I didn't have an emergency C-section and
Right.
because like I wasn't rushed in there, like I thought, oh, well, people have it worse.
Yeah.
So like how could I even, begin to say that what mine was was traumatic? I think,
We always downplay our own,
yeah,
for some
right.
reason. I don't
And
know if
it's
it's a
like,
coping mechanism or what we do, but we always downplay our own
yeah.
experiences when no, we don't need to do that at all.
Right. And I think, like that's what I've learned. It's really unique to each of us. And like we
Yep.
can't judge whether or not someone's experience is bad enough to be deemed traumatic. And I think, the biggest person that we have to tell that to is ourselves.
Yep. Absolutely.
And we have to, remind ourselves that, you know, what happened was huge, and it's okay that we need to, heal from it and really, mm, I don't know how to say, but like,
Be able to go beyond it. That's what I was
yeah,
thinking.
yeah, like we need to just say it what it is, and
Yeah.
in
Absolutely. It's
in
okay.
our own right, in our own personal journey, it is, traumatic for us. Like there could be somebody, that gets their finger pricked and that's traumatic. Like, I think like we can't really judge where that line is drawn.
Yeah. It's so individual.
Yeah.
And our past experiences have so much to do with it, and then how we internalize it, and then whether or not we seek help afterwards and are able to talk about it and get work through it some. And even when, and I'm sure you can talk about this, that even though you sought help and you went and talked about it and stuff, it doesn't change the fact that it was still traumatic. It
Yeah.
just changes the way that you're able to work through it and be able to move past it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like once I really allowed myself to say that it was traumatic and
Mm-hmm.
gave myself that permission to
Oh,
heal and
yeah.
want to heal, it really started to just peel back so many layers that I wasn't even aware of. And that
Mm.
was even, prior to the birth of my daughter. Like that was, traumatic experiences that were in my life before her.
Mhm.
And I really just opened up, I think, a whole healing journey that I never expected was going to happen, but was so needed.
Oh, and that's, I'm sure that came out just in you as a whole person, but then even in your mothering after that,
Mm-hmm.
after starting to work through all that, how that would change you from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Being able to I feel like, like when we're able to talk through some of those things and we're able to accept ourselves better,
Mm-hmm.
and then understand how we're reacting or or holding back in certain areas. And just you talking about that, I was starting to get teary-eyed because I was thinking some of the same things, that being able to just tell myself, hey, that was traumatic,
Mm-hmm.
and it is okay to say that that was traumatic. It's okay to say I experienced this and it was awful.
Yeah. I mean, it still feels funny sometimes when I say it, like having to, voice that and say, like, oh, it was a traumatic experience. Like, I still kind of get that like sheepish feeling of, like,
Mhm.
oh, well, it wasn't as bad as somebody else's. I still, I hear that in the back of my head and I say, who am I to, talk about this and be so adamant about it. But, you know, what I've experienced in healing from it, I think is something that all of us need to give ourselves that permission to accept
Absolutely.
it.
Because your experience matters.
Yeah.
I mean, just because, however many other women have had C-sections, in the world, or even just say in your city, right? Your individual experience matters.
Right.
And being able to voice that, I mean, good job, because I feel like that is half the battle and half the continuing battle. Being able to just say, what happened, and even just that, yeah, that was bad. That was a bad experience that I had, and not compare to anyone else. And I think as women, a lot of times we, even if nobody in the room has said anything to us about something, if you're like me, I automatically think what they might be thinking. So if I said, I had a traumatic experience, like me personally, I grew up in a cult. And if I said something like that, well, it was bad, then my automatic is, well, but it wasn't nearly as bad as this person's experience because they had
Mhm.
this, this, and this. I at least had some good come out of, it. And again, downplay our own situation just because we think somebody else probably had it worse.
Right. Yeah. And we're kind of told like we need to be grateful for what we do
Yep.
have. And,
Hmm.
I absolutely am like grateful for
Of course you
everything.
are.
But it's also, it can be like, I'm grateful and I also had a traumatic experience. Like
Yep.
we're allowed to be both. And I think that's hard to process a lot of the times. And it's a conflicting emotion because we don't see that often enough, or it's not talked about enough that, you can be this and that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think I'm thinking for myself, the last birth I had was very traumatic. And I remember our pastor had came over to see our newborn, and he just was smiling and he said, "Wow, I just can't believe the ease with which you give birth." And I just started crying. And he had
Mm.
no clue what he had said and how that made me feel. But because I was thinking, well, that's right. I should be grateful. I should be happy. I should be, thankful that I have this baby and I was able to have. But inside, I was hurting so bad, and I
Mhm.
had been so traumatized, but I couldn't voice it. And I think the same thing there, that, like, it's okay to say, and yes, I'm so thankful that I have a beautiful, healthy baby. And that was terrible.
Right.
And I shouldn't have had to experience that. Or, and, I've got a lot of recovery to do.
Right. And like I was saying too, like, before becoming a mother, I was very independent and very stuck in I needed to be strong and,
Mm-hmm.
like not let anything get to me. And,
Mm-hmm.
it was very like, not that I didn't share my emotions or wasn't like an emotional person, but it was, I can, recover from this. I can move on and I don't need to, you know, process what happened. It's
Mm-hmm.
just let's just move on and chug through and keep on going. And you know what I have done now to really process my past and what has occurred in my life, I think I have become even stronger
Mm,
to get to that point of vulnerability and
absolutely.
allow myself to, relive it and reprocess it and see it in a different way.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so, so worth it. to,
Oh,
find that healing.
absolutely. And do you find that it's a continuing process? It's
Oh
not just a
yeah.
yeah, it's not a okay, we went through that. Now I'm done. That's not
Mhm.
how trauma works.
Yeah, it's
And
always going to be there. It's always something that I'm, working on and working
mhm.
through, and I think that's like a really awesome part of it, like you keep on seeing, like I said, like how many layers you can really peel back.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's plenty, aren't there?
Mhm.
How do you think so how did that affect going into your son, having your son? Was it night and day difference?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think because I did so much work on really healing myself and getting to a point of where, I am at now, it
Mhm.
helped tremendously. How I was talking about the fear and really just being scared in that moment. I had, you know, processed what would happen or what it would be like if I ended up in a repeat cesarean.
Mhm.
But I ultimately was hoping for the VBAC. And I think just everything leading up to it prepared me in such a new way. And I think mentally preparing myself was a step that I didn't think of before with my first.
Mhm.
And going through different courses and certifications and processes to get me to be in a state, um I guess, to prepare myself for his birth, in the sense of, you know, expecting what what might come or what might
Mhm.
happen and things like that, and really being like okay with it, I
I'd
think
say
allowed me to really
we
go
definitely
ahead.
focus, I'd say, more on the physical aspect of it.
Mhm.
Like all the time, right? We talk about coping mechanisms, childbirth education class. That's all about talking generally about this is the process and this is what you need to do to deal with the physical pain. And the mental aspect, a lot of times, is really put on the back burner and not addressed.
Yeah. And I think it really goes hand in hand. I think if our mental state can be at a place that it needs to be, it makes the physical side of things easier
Absolutely.
to go through. I mean,
Yeah.
it was from going from a cesarean with my first to a completely unmedicated birth
Mm.
for and vaginal birth for, my second.
Mhm.
I just I was shocked myself. I was, in complete awe
How
of
empowering.
what had yeah, I just remember, having that moment of him on my chest and holding him and saying like, wow, like I just did this.
Feel
Like
like you were on top of the world, I bet.
yeah, it was such a, healing and rewarding
Oh,
moment all in itself.
that's
And
wonderful.
yeah.
So, I would love to hear about since then. I know he's 3 months old. So,
Mhm.
the time in between, when you have a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So I started my podcast January of 2021, so a little over a year. And that was a result of, figuring out what had happened. It was part of my healing journey
Mhm.
with my daughter and the trauma that we had been through, and really just kind of like diving into, what was going on postpartum and what was happening, and asking all these questions and talking to all these people and figuring out all of these things. And so I was already having all these conversations and meeting all these people, and I said, why not record this,
Yeah.
and why not, allow this to be something for mamas to, tap into if they are feeling the same way. And it has really just kind of evolved into such an amazing experience. And I've enjoyed it so
Oh,
much.
that's great. So,
So
what's the name of your podcast?
it's called Entering Motherhood.
Oh, beautiful.
Thank you.
So, do you just talk to other mothers on there?
Yeah, so we've had, midwives and doulas, other moms,
Oh,
chiropractors, just people
that's
that,
wonderful.
are in the birth space and are doing things to help moms.
Well, I will make sure that we link the podcast and your website in the show notes for our listeners so they can go check you out for sure.
Yeah, we're coming up on 100 episodes and I'm excited.
Wow, that's awesome. How wonderful. Had you ever thought about doing a podcast before?
No, never. I think it was just one of those things, like as I was going through, it was kind of like shouting out to me, like, you need to tell your story. You need to, get this out there. You need to, just share your voice and get what you're finding out like available to them.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I
thank you so
just
much for
started.
doing that. That's awesome. I'm looking forward to listening to it because I haven't got to listen to it yet. So
Yeah.
that's going to be on my list for my drive tomorrow to get to listen in. So I'll make sure
Yeah.
and share that with the listeners.
Yeah. And I
Thank
have a couple of, short mini episodes of little things that I have found that have helped me heal in my journey of like healing my trauma.
Oh,
So,
that's wonderful.
yeah.
Yes. Let's make sure we get those exact ones so I can link to the Healing Trauma Mamas. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing part of your journey with us and for being, an integral part of the Facebook group. I know you've been a member on there for a while now and really appreciate it. Is
Yeah,
there
thanks.
anything that you'd love to just share with the listeners here?
I think just, allowing people to understand that we can heal from our trauma and it is possible. Like I was saying earlier, we're never going to forget it. It's always going to be a continuing journey. But
Mhm.
I think, it's worth starting and allowing ourselves to, get to a place of healing.
Yeah, taking those steps
Yeah.
to
Yeah. And it's okay.
yeah, absolutely. And seeking, do you still see your counselor or therapist? I'm not sure which one you were
Yeah,
going to.
yeah. I don't
That's
go as
good.
often, but I still, seek someone to talk to and help with that. And
Good. I encourage everyone to do that, to find somebody in your area that you can talk to. And now, I mean, we were talking earlier, before we started the podcast, this technology and the world
mhm,
today. I mean, there is so much that you can do online, and there's so many resources that we have. So there's really, I mean, no reason not to seek help except for you just in the way of yourself.
yeah,
So just, realizing that it is okay. Um, Wherever you are at this point in time, even if you are like Sarah, on the floor crying, at some point in time, it's okay. And it will get better. And today is the day to take the step for some healing.
yeah, I agree.
Thank you for listening. May you be encouraged and strengthened by what you've heard today. Remember, you are dearly loved by your Creator, so be who He created you to be. May you go in peace, friends. Till next time, Shalom.